Hello, everyone. Welcome back to A Motorsports Addict. In today's episode, we focus on the high-stakes rivalry in the 2024 MotoGP season between defending champion Francesco Pecco Bagnaia and the ultra-tenacious Jorge Martin. The narrative of this year has been framed as the World Championship of Errors by Pecco Bagnaia himself, highlighting how mistakes have shaped the trajectory of both riders this season. Pecco identified the new Michelin tires as a factor in their struggles and famously called this a championship of mistakes. At the time that Pecco made this proclamation, there were some comments which asked if it was a fair comment to make to describe the 2024 season as a championship of mistakes. Personally, I don't think it's a far-fetched or unfair comment to make when you consider the highs and lows of this season and how the pendulum and momentum have swung back and forth between both riders. 2024 has been quite the exciting year. The title race has seen the wildest swings. Of course, if you're one of the riders or their teams, you'd be totally frustrated. And even as a fan of either rider, I don't think you can watch this season without feeling equal measures of joy and frustration as your star scored absolutely blinding performances one day and totally shambolic performances the very next. I mean, it leads you to wonder, does anyone even want to win this championship? Having said that, as an unbiased fan, this has been one of the most exciting MotoGP seasons in a while. Although the season has been lacking in direct head-to-head battles between the rivals, we have at least witnessed moments of raw excitement and shocking disbelief as events have unfolded this season. Before I get into this episode, I want to appeal for your support. Please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel. This teaches the algorithm to push my content to more people. Please leave a comment and please share this channel with anyone who might enjoy the content. In essence, all I'm asking is like, share, subscribe, and comment, please. Now let's get on with it. Unless you've been living under a rock or you don't watch MotoGP at all, you would know that the story of the 2024 season has been the rivalry between Jorge Martin and Pecco Bagnaia. This rivalry has basically continued from last season when both riders duked it out for the World Championship. That 2023 contest went down to the wire and it was ultimately won by Pecco. But clearly it wasn't the end of it. And for both riders, the battle was only going to continue. Notably, 2023 was also a championship created by errors from both riders. Bagnaia certainly had his share of errors and crashes from the beginning of the season, which he began as a first-time world champion. Given the pace of the Ducati GP23, Bagnaia seemed destined to win a second title on the trot. But then there was the issue of crashes, which denied him the title in 2021 and almost cost him the 2022 championship. He had a stellar opening round in Portugal, and the title race seemed like it could be concluded early. And then Pecco went on a crashing spree, losing out in Argentina and Austin before rallying to score consistent wins and finishes. Bezzecchi and Martin were the main contenders for this championship. Pecco was so dominant that halfway through the season, he held a 90-point lead over Jorge Martin, and it seemed like the rest of the season was a foregone conclusion. And then Pecco had an unforced error. He crashed out of the Grand Prix of Catalonia in a completely horrendous crash that resulted in injuries to his legs. This was Pecco pushing at the time when arguably he didn't need to push so hard, particularly given the kind of advantage he held in the World Championship. He could pretty much afford to run with the pack and take very little risks and still come home with the World Championship. But that wasn't to be. This one incident would have far-reaching implications for the World Championship, allowing Jorge Martin to catch up with him. And boy, did Jorge take advantage. He won his third consecutive sprint in Indonesia and took the lead of a title race by 7 points. And the once dominant Bagnaia was now playing catch-up. This was, however, short-lived, as Martin succumbed to his own errors the very next day. He crashed out of the main Grand Prix, which Pecco won, allowing Bagnaia to retake the championship lead. The pendulum would swing back and forth until the final round of the season, where another series of mistakes from Martin handed the win and the second consecutive world title to Bagnaia. In 2024, both riders have continued this rivalry, and they have been locked in the ultimate battle for supremacy, which has also unfortunately been a comedy of errors at points. It's been a real roller coaster ride for the riders and teams and fans. Both Bagnaia and Martin seem equally eager to hand the title to their rival. They simply don't seem to have learned enough from last season to curb the errors and run a consistently fault-free championship. So I think it would be easier to forgive if it was the odd error here or there. But there have been so many mistakes between both riders. Like, both riders are not consistent enough, not mature enough to deliver the elite levels of consistency that you require to sustain a world championship campaign. After the events of 2021 to 2023, naturally, one would expect heading into this season that both riders would have learned from their errors in the previous title fight. It was clear from very early on that Martin and Bagnaia would be the main contenders for the title again. They've been Ducati stablemates since Martin joined the Pramac Ducati team in 2021. Their shared history adds another layer to this rivalry. No doubt, memories of the 2023 season loom large in both riders' minds. The pressure of defending his title, coupled with the weight of past mistakes, have created a complex narrative around Pecco's performance. As defending champion, the weight of expectation is heavy. Pecco has won the last 2 world championships, the first back-to-back winner since Marc Marquez. Bagnaia has demonstrated impressive speed, winning more races than any other rider this season, showcasing his ability to dominate the field. So, given this dominance, it's hard to understand that he's behind Martin in the title race. He's also struggled with his starts on numerous occasions, and he struggled with the tires. On paper, Pecco should have the upper hand. The reigning 2-time world champion is on the factory bike with the full resources of the Lenovo Ducati factory at his disposal. So why is he behind Jorge Martin in the championship? Because Pecco has not been able to banish the ghost of his previous seasons. Just like 2022 and 2023, his season has been marked by mistakes, having crashed out of 3 main races and a number of sprints. These errors have not only cost him valuable points, but they've also opened the door for Jorge Martin to mount a serious challenge for the title. On the other hand, Martin's season has been equally dramatic, even though it's been marked by much more reliable consistency from Jorge. Once again, Jorge has been the king of the sprints, proving that he's the faster rider over short race distances. Since the sprint race format was introduced, Martin has won more times than any other rider, winning a record 14 sprints, 9 times last season and 5 times this season already. Beyond the sprint victories has been Jorge's consistency. Scoring points when he couldn't clinch victory. He has effectively capitalized on Bagnaia's mistakes. Martin has solidified his reputation as a formidable competitor. Despite this general consistency, there's a reason why we have tagged this the championship of errors. Because Martin has also made his own share of mistakes. While not as many or frequent as Pecco, Martin has his own fair share of errors. Powering Martin's run to sprint victories has been his ability to score very quick starts. In the last few rounds, it hasn't really mattered whether Jorge was starting on pole or on the second or third row of the grid because of his ability to nail absolutely lightning starts. Whereas Pecco has struggled to get his bike off the line as consistently as Martin has done. But like I said, there have been crashes. Jorge has crashed out while leading races on a couple of occasions. And when he didn't crash, Martin made the totally mind-boggling decision to pit for his wet bike because of a few raindrops at Misano. Although, surprisingly or perhaps unsurprisingly, given his experiences in 2023, Martin has become more composed as the 2024 season has unfolded. He seems to have more control over his usually explosive temperament. He came into the season with more maturity, which has only grown as the season unfolded. The gap is currently at 10 points after the Japanese Grand Prix. On paper, the momentum is with Pecco after clawing back a 24-point gap over the past two race weekends. But this is 2024. How many times have we thought Bagnaia absolutely has momentum now, only for him to crash out of the next race and for Martin to seize the initiative? And we think, okay, Martin is back in charge of this championship and he's got momentum now. And then a week or two race weekends later, story has changed again. This season continues to blow the mind. 2024 also marks a pivotal year for both competitors. Jorge's journey has been one of resurgence and determination. Jorge Martin is on the Pramac Ducati. His factory GP24 is identical to Pecco's bike, but the Pramac team are a satellite team who don't have the same budget and resources as the factory squad. However, reputedly, Pramac's contract entitles them to the same upgrades and equipment as the factory Ducati team, and they reportedly have access to the same factory engineers and all the data and support that Pecco and his teammate Enea Bastianini enjoy. Martin's motivation doubtless stems from a combination of personal ambition and his determination to rise above the setbacks he has faced within the Ducati team this season. After being overlooked for promotion to the Ducati team in favor of Enea Bastianini in 2022 and 2023, Martin carried that disappointment into the current season. But he came into 2024 believing that he had a commitment from Ducati that they would put him on the factory team in 2025 and that he had nothing more to prove. So imagine how Martin felt when he learned that Ducati had decided not to promote him to the factory team, but instead to sign Marc Marquez from the satellite Gresini team in his place. This about face definitely shocked Jorge and the entire paddock and forced Martin to find another team after he had already declared that he would not stay with the Pramac team after this season. The Ducati team effectively dropped Jorge Martin, despite the fact that he was one of the two strongest riders on the bike in the past two seasons, and the fact that they had made him a promise that they would promote him to the factory team alongside Bagnaia. So imagine how he channels this motivation. With a contract signed to race for Factory Aprilia in 2025, Martin is motivated more than ever to clinch the title this year. If he wins the championship in 2024, it would be poetic revenge, as he would take the number one plate, which he won on the Ducati, to Aprilia. This potential victory symbolizes not only a personal triumph, but also Martin's success in reclaiming his narrative in the sport. The challenge, of course, is that Jorge Martin is on a satellite bike. And there's a reason why most world champions have been powered by full factory bikes in the history of the World Championship. Title wins on satellite bikes have been very few and far between. The last time a rider on a satellite bike won the World Championship was as far back as the two-stroke era, with the great Valentino Rossi in 2001 on the satellite Honda in Nastro Azzurro colors. Even then, while this was supposedly technically a satellite team, the reality was quite different. It's not a secret that the Honda was simply a full factory Honda effort, running in different colors from its neighbors next door in the Repsol Honda garage. Since 2001, other riders like Seti Gibernau and Marco Melandri have come close, ironically finishing second in the championship to Rossi in 2003, 2004, and 2005 for the Gresini satellite team. Winning the title on a satellite bike is a seemingly impossible task that Martin has set out to achieve this season. But you have to admire how Martin has gone about it and how he's emerged as a beacon of consistency. Now, let's look at Pecco's struggles. Bagnaia's journey through the 2004 season illustrates the duality of triumph and struggle. As a reigning champion, he's earned accolades for his speed and skill on his day. However, the stats reveal concerning trends. Pecco has more wins than any other rider this season, but Pecco also has more errors than any other frontrunner in the title race. His crashes have not only cost him race victories, but they've also robbed him of crucial points in the World Championship. In addition to crashes on his own, Pecco has been involved in on-track clashes with other top contenders, including both Marquez brothers. These incidents have raised questions about Pecco's judgment under pressure. The psychological aspect of racing clearly plays a significant role here. Pecco is in a high-pressure situation. Each error compounds the stress of defending his title, piling on the pressure and making it absolutely essential for him to find a balance between aggression and caution. But as the season wears down and the number of remaining races continues to reduce, arguably more and more pressure piles on Pecco's shoulders to secure the World Championship. The fact that Martin is leaving Ducati this season puts even more pressure on Pecco because he now bears the sole responsibility to ensure that Martin does not take the number one plate to Aprilia next season. Pecco is Ducati's only hope of retaining the World Championship and the number one plate going into the 2025 season. But this isn't all. With Marquez coming into the garage next season, Pecco will be fighting with the most decorated rider on the grid, on the same machinery. If Martin has been a tough nut for Pecco to crack in 2023 and 2024, imagine what it would be like to contend with one of the greatest riders to ever ride a Grand Prix bike. The arrival of Marc Marquez to Ducati next season definitely adds to the intrigue. Marquez, who is renowned for his aggressive racing style and mind games, has shown great potential on his GP23 this season, despite being on a completely new bike in a satellite team where he does not have all the resources he used to have at his disposal. When Marquez was joining the Gresini team for 2024, some pundits expected him to immediately challenge for the title, given his depth of natural abilities. Unfortunately, this hasn't happened because the GP24 is simply in a class of its own. There's only so much an exceptionally talented rider like Marquez can do. But based on his performances and his utter demolition of the other riders on the GP23, it is clear that Marc is riding in some amazing form for next season. I am convinced that the only thing that's keeping Marquez out of the title race this season is the fact that the GP23 cannot match the raw performance of the GP24. Otherwise, this might well be a three-horse race between Martin, Pecco, and Marquez, or perhaps the title would have been decided already in favor of Marc Marquez. Who knows? Please let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think Marquez would have genuinely been a title contender on the GP24 this season? Could he have won the title already? Please let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you. Anyway, Marquez is not in the race this year, so we have just two gladiators, Marquez and Bagnaia. And what amazing gladiators they have been. Amazing, error-prone, metronomic, and inconsistent gladiators. This has been a championship of paradoxes and frustration from one week to the next. Now, let's take a look at some of the race statistics. As of the latest round at Japan, here is a snapshot of how the results break down. Pecco Bagnaia has 8 total race wins. Martin has 3. Marquez has 2. Bastianini has 2. And Vinales has 1. Effectively, Bagnaia has won the same number of races as all the other riders combined. Pecco has indeed been dominant in the main races. But what about the sprint races? A brief analysis of the sprint race dynamics reveals that Pecco is still ahead here. Bagnaia has won 6 sprint races to Martin's 5. Vinales has got 2. Bastianini, Marquez, and Espargaro have 1 each. And as they say, the numbers don't lie. I think one of the key factors this season has been the psychological battles going on between both riders and in the head of each individual. We can't overemphasize the importance of the mental aspect of racing. Both Martin and Pecco face unique psychological pressures that influence their performances on the track. For Jorge, the desire for redemption and the need to prove his worth after Ducati's decision to dump him and sign Marc Marquez is paramount. There's no doubt that it can be soul-destroying for any competitor to have given their worth season after season and to have been passed over in favor of another rider. It's sure to affect his confidence. Jorge must channel this pressure into his motivation, and by focusing on his strengths and scoring points consistently, Martin has positioned himself as a viable threat to Bagnaia's title hopes. Bagnaia's situation is just that little bit more precarious. As defending champion, he carries the greater burden of expectation. You might think that with 2 titles already, that perhaps Pecco has nothing to prove. But that's not really true, is it now? Because he's expected to deliver week after week, practice session to qualifying session to sprint race to Grand Prix on Sunday. When you're thinking about the favorites, you always expect Pecco to be right there or thereabouts, either in pole position or front row of the grid. And at the end of the race, you expect him to either be on the top step or somewhere on the podium. But you're always expecting him to be right there at the very top of his game every single week. And that is the crux of the pressure. And there's always the pressure of being on the best bike and fans questioning if it's the bike or his talent that's making the difference. You know, it would probably be easier if, as 2-time champion, you went into a 3rd season with a bike that wasn't quite up to scratch. If somehow the team had fallen short of previous standards, as happened with Marc Marquez on the Honda in the last couple of seasons, where he simply not had the machinery to challenge. Now, if that's the case for the reigning world champion, it's easier to deal with than in this case, where he's on the best bike, so he's expected to win. And then there's also the pressure of knowing that his main rival is also on the same bike. They have equal machinery, and the only difference is the individual rider. That is the height of pressure for both riders. There's also the pressure that's brought on by Jorge Martin's relentless determination. It's got to be eating at Pecco, or indeed to anyone in his shoes, to know that no matter how hard he tries, Martin is always ready to pounce on the slightest error, to claw back any gains Pecco might have made, or to open an even wider gap, depending on the circumstances. And so each error amplifies the pressure, creating a cycle that can be very difficult for both riders to break. They must somehow find a well of resilience and learn to compartmentalize their mistakes and focus on the next challenge. In a situation where the riders have equal machinery, equal support, it really is down to their individual talent and their mentality in every single race weekend. As the season progresses and the championship winds down to the last handful of rounds, the question is more pertinent than ever. Who is more likely to win the title between Pecco and Martin? Of course, like I said earlier, statistically, Bagnaia seems to have the upper hand with his higher number of wins and his history of clawing back significant gaps to win the titles in 2022 and 2023. And so there's that suggestion that he's got the experience, he's got the track record, he's been there and done that he might be able to find that extra gear. But as we've said, his propensity for errors cannot be ignored. The crashes that have cost him valuable points have effectively opened the door for Martin to capitalize. And Martin's ability to score points consistently, even when he's not winning, suggests a tactical approach that could pay off in the long run. Martin has scored valuable points when he's not at his best. For instance, at Aragon, where Pecco had a nightmare weekend, and Martin clearly didn't have the pace to match Marc Marquez. But Martin scored the best points that were available to him by coming home in second place, while Pecco crashed out of a potential podium challenge. And similarly at Misano, after making that disastrous error to stop for a bike change while Bagnaia stayed out, he still fought back. He didn't give up, and he recovered to score a single point. This point might well be important if the title goes down to the wire. The following weekend, Martin recovered to score double second places at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. This ability to get over setbacks has been a very important marker of Martin's growing maturity this season. He's been able to pull himself together and shrug off every disappointment without allowing them to weigh him down. I can't forget his spirited performance after crashing out of the first lap during the Indonesia sprint race to recover and finish in 10th place. Now, while he didn't win points this time around, the fact that he was willing to try and pass so many riders to score at 10th place is testament to his determination and mental strength this season. That's why he's been able to build the lead that he's done, despite his own setbacks. But also, being able to recover to 10th place after crashing out was proof of his raw speed and the overwhelming dominance of the Ducati GP24 relative to his rivals and their bikes. Martin and the GP24 are simply a lethal combination, perhaps even more so than Pecco on the same bike. Or what do you think? Which is the more formidable pairing, Jorge Martin and the GP24, or Pecco Bagnaia and the GP24? Please let me know what you think in the comments. Apart from raw speed, Martin now seems to have the edge mentally as he's making fewer errors. The difference between his highs and his lows is not as stark as they are with Pecco, who can go from winning on Saturday to a DNF on Sunday. But you can't write Bagnaia out of a title race after his epic fights to clinch the championship in 2022 and 2023. In 2022, he famously clawed back a 91-point deficit to beat Fabio Quartararo, whilst he also had to make up a lot of ground and beat his own inconsistencies to beat Martin to the title in 2023. He's already come back several times this season, while also surrendering valuable leads to Martin, as the elastic bands that bind both riders have been stretched in both directions. The truth is, this season is totally unpredictable. As we approach the final races of the 2024 MotoGP season, the rivalry between Jorge Martin and Pecco Bagnaia continues to captivate fans and pundits alike. Every race brings new challenges, and the narrative of errors has shaped the championship in unprecedented ways. Pecco's status as defending champion under threat, and Martin being motivated by the need to recover from past disappointments, the closing races promise to be very thrilling. The interplay of skill and strategy and mental strength will ultimately determine who takes home the title. Both riders have their strengths and their weaknesses, and perhaps the winner will be the person who is able to remain most consistent going forward. It's not necessarily about winning every race, because Joan Mir famously won the 2020 title while scoring only one race win, beating Morbidelli and Quartararo, who scored 3 race victories each. Oliveira also won 2 races, yet the title won to the man who won only 1 race. So we know it's possible for either rider to win the title without winning any more races. It's simply about consistency going forward and being able to capitalize on your rival's errors. Could you imagine that Pecco or Martin had scored just 10 points in each of the main races that they failed to finish? Can you imagine what the championship position would look like right now? We know that Martin has failed to finish 2 main races, while Bagnaia has failed to finish 3. What it would mean would be, if they both finish those races, Jorge would have an extra 20 points and Bagnaia would have an extra 30 points. And so when you look at the table, it proves more than anything else that consistency is key. If either rider can minimize his own errors and capitalize on the days when his rival is weak or has a bad day for whatever reason, they stand a stronger chance of winning the title. For instance, Pecco was able to reduce his points deficits to Martin from 21 to 10 points over the Japan race weekend by scoring maximum points. But on the other hand, Martin was also able to reduce the damage done to his championship lead on one of his weaker weekends by scoring a 4th place in the sprint and a 2nd place in the main race. This was arguably the best he could have done and the maximum points he could have scored. But this perfectly illustrates the challenges and potentially how the season can be salvaged or lost by either protagonist. The reality is that both riders absolutely need to cut out the errors because the stakes are high. For Martin, this season might be the best opportunity to win a world championship, as he will not have the benefit of riding the Rocket Ducati next season. Unless Aprilia can make a remarkable jump in development by the beginning of next season, no one really expects Martin to be in the running for the title in 2025. If this really is the case, then it will be similarly implausible in 2026 when the engine freeze takes effect ahead of the new technical rules that will come into effect in 2027. Effectively, this might be Martin's best chance before then. On the other hand, Pecco also must win for very similar reasons. Although he will remain on the dominant Ducati GP25 next season, he will have Marc Marquez in the next garage. The Marc Marquez, who on the form is in right now, must be regarded as the favorite for the 2025 World Championship. If Pecco is to stand a chance of beating Marquez, he has to be absolutely inch perfect throughout the season. Because if Pecco had made the sort of errors he had made while he was competing with any of the greats, whether it be Mick Doohan, Valentino Rossi, Marc Marquez, or Wayne Rainey at their prime and on competitive machinery, he would most likely not have won those two titles, because these greats were not just champions, they were very consistent, and they would have punished Pecco's many errors. Pecco would have stood absolutely no chance against a more consistent great. And if Pecco does not fix these errors this season, not only will he lose this year's title, he will also lose to Marc in 2025 and 2026. The rider who wins this World Championship of Mistakes, as Pecco has put it, is the rider who is able to master his errors. And in Pecco's case, that is the only way he's able to beat Marc Marquez next season. If he can't cut out the errors and beat Jorge Martin this season, he might as well forget 2025 and 2026. Or what do you think? Do you think Pecco stands a chance of winning the World Championship with this many errors over a season? Please let me know what you think in the comments. On a final note, one thing we can say is that despite the fierce rivalry between the riders, this title race has been marked by the absence of fierce on-track battles. Although Pecco and Martin are locked in a head-to-head race for the world title, there have been very few direct contests on track. We haven't seen Martin and Bagnaia duke it out for race wins and podiums the way we saw Marquez or Rossi or Stoner duke it out with their rivals. While there have been direct battles between Pecco and Marquez and between Martin and Bastianini, we have not really seen Jorge and Pecco slug it out at the end of the race. Unlike previous years where we have watched title rivals beat each other up week after week, these guys have mostly avoided such battles. It has mostly been psychological. Usually, it's one rider getting an early lead and the other rider either crashing out or scoring the best points available behind them. The overtake between Bastianini and Martin at the second Misano race was more of a sort of thing we expect to see between bitter title rivals. The few overtakes between Martin and Bagnaia this season have been quite clean and respectful. It's almost too clean. And this is probably due to the fact that the rivalry has been defined more by their errors than by direct head-to-head battles. And going on from this, I must commend both riders for their sportsmanship. Despite the heated rivalry and the occasional overtakes, both riders have maintained a healthy relationship, characterized by a mutual, an obvious respect for each other. You'll often see them exchanging words and hugs after a race, with none of the toxic drama that we've witnessed in other title battles. I won't say that Jorge and Bagnaia are close friends, but you can see mutual respect in their interactions. I hope they can maintain this cordiality as the season winds down. But you sort of wonder, maybe the season would be more exciting if there was an obvious toxicity, if there was an obvious dislike between both riders. Or what do you think? Have these guys been too respectful? Let me know what you think in the comments. And so I asked the final set of questions. Who do you think will win this season? Between Pecco Bagnaia and Jorge Martin, who do you think has the final edge? Please let me know what you think in the comments. And so we've come to the end of another episode. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of A Motorsports Addict. Be sure to join us next time as we continue to follow the MotoGP Championship race and delve into the intricacies of motorsports. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth analysis and discussions. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your support. I appreciate you. Have a great day. Thank you.